Great. So today's topic is all about ransomware and ransomware recoveries, and also looking at how AWS well-architected framework and at least approach the best practices of the well-architected framework could potentially help us with respect to achieving application resilience. And by the way, this webinar will be recorded and distributed later on. So if you or one of your colleagues, is not able to attend today, please forward that to them appropriately. And also, if you are kind enough, if you could distribute that over social media and other places, would be really useful as well. All right. So, I don't know if you had dialed into any of our previous webinars. We day in, day out talk about application resilience, and ransomwares are one of the threats to that application resilience, particularly when it comes down to the cloud applications that you might be running, or you might be even thinking of running, or in the process of partially kind of moving to the cloud as well. And Gartner has recognized us as one of the cool vendors. So, in a lot of our presentation materials, we tend to refer to Gartner as a third-party analyst who provides that important information, critical third-party view of how the vendors are, in the space, as well as how the platform vendors from AWS, GCP, as well as Azure provide that level of capabilities really required for your applications to be resilient. So let's talk about ransomware, and the picture is definitely not good, right? Just last week, FBI warned of ransomware attacks, right? And if you had seen, if you just go to, if you're a Google News reader user, just go and type ransomware attacks. I did that, a few days ago when I was trying to prepare for this webinar. I used to use a lot of those older material, and I thought, just let's go and type it and check it out. And I could get like ton of information. It's on the national news. It's on the Washington Post, right? If you look at the, IT being as one of the critical, industries now, given that pandemic has really pushed the boundary of, how IT is being used. But on the other hand, it's also being threatened, right? Threatened a lot to an extent where businesses are getting really hammered and businesses are going really out of business as well, right? Because of these ransomware attacks, and it's in everyday life. So the topic is very critical. It's being discussed every day, every minute across the world, and in the US is a lot of that, right? Most of the ransomware attacks are happening in the US because of the penetration of the technology itself. That is all great. We are not going to solve the world problem, but we can solve some of our own problems with respect to how we can protect of critical systems, and most importantly, how we can recover those critical systems in the event of an attack or after the attack, right? So the recovery of the system is going to be the biggest topic. And that's because of not only the cost associated with recoveries, but as you can see, this particular news covers about recovery, right? A city took roughly a year, and more than 100K to get all the technology back. And sometimes they may not be able to even get all the systems back up and running. Atlanta, a few years ago, paid 56,000 US dollars to the attacker, and it took $2.6 million to recover from that single ransomware attack. So attack is not the problem, but the recovery is the most critical thing, because if you're not able to recover, why really worry about protecting against ransomware? So I hope that sets the context for our discussion today, right? So given that, we need to understand these ransomware attacks properly. Of course, this understanding will keep on changing. will kind of the boundaries of that understanding will be increasing more and more, because the attacks are becoming very, very sophisticated, right? But there are stages of these attacks. At least, from Gartner's perspective, they explain in terms of what really happens, what systems need to be properly protected. So it starts with simple penetration of your network by an attacker over a period of time. They don't immediately act. They take time. They're patient. They are getting in through, through emails or through laptops or through any devices that you might be having, you might be using day to day, and they get in slowly, kind of embed themselves into the layers, every layer, so starting from the network, going to the end user devices and so on, then start getting into the critical systems like Active Directory and the DNS, maybe the separate one or the combination of AD and DNS together, and then the backup systems themselves. Because now, if you go back and refer the old news versus the latest news about how ransomware attacks have become sophisticated, is that one big change is that the newest ransomware attacks are really attacking the backup systems themselves, right? So that's a second stage, get into the credentials and start stealing the credentials of the critical systems. Third, these attackers have now learned the behavior of the recoveries and where the recoveries are really happening. So they go after the backup systems, right? The backup systems are protected. They are trying to be a lot more kind of understanding of how the behavior of backup administrators and the IT organizations themselves, because these backup systems are very old, right? Before all these MFA, multi-factor authentications came along, and they may not be patched properly because they are also running on typical operating systems and so on. So attack on those backup systems is a gold mine for them. That once they attack the backup system, they not only now can able to understand the production data and then can steal the data from there, but also steal from the backup system. So they can go either way. But if they can get to the backup system and steal the data and protect the data with their own encryption key, so you cannot even get in, that is a good avenue for them to demand ransom payments. And that's where we get stuck, because now you're at a point where, even assuming that at a point where you are ready to pay the ransom, whatever they demand, you pay through Bitcoins or some other means, that's all totally fine. But the key thing is that in order to understand how these stages of attack really happens, it's important that you understand the behavior of those systems where you can really pay attention and protect the backup systems properly and so on. So now, there are stages within that individual, sub-stages, you call it, right? Within that particular backup system protection-wise, the systems are evolving, the backup systems are evolving, the recovery systems are evolving day by day, right? In order to really help organizations to prevent and recover from these attacks. When you can also do the early detection. That's like a security industry's kind of area where more and more sophisticated security analysis and detection mechanisms are emerging, right? Then you might be allocating a budget clearly, or the budget might be expanding day by day as well. So detection of the attack has enough systems, and I'm sure you are getting streams and streams of logs to even understand what's going on. But we are not talking about that. So detection is separate. But on the other hand, how to really protect your own backup system, where the scheduling of the backups happen, the actual jobs where the retention policies were applied, and the jobs run to really capture the data day in, day out, maybe before the attack happened, after the attack happened, right? All those critical component, critical feature access is very, very important when you look at the backup system itself, right? So once that is done, now you should be in a position to really orchestrate the recovery. When you think about orchestrating the recovery, and this is an important topic where we will go in deeper to understand, is it just about the data? Is it about the system and so on? But the key thing is how fast can you recover, right? If you're spending time, energy, money, and all your critical resources that might be, human resources I'm talking about, if you have enough skills with respect to really understanding the cloud systems and during this great resignation time, right? Those nuances really play into the recovery as well. And how fast can you recover? That is directly equivalent to, can you save your business? That's critical, right? So if you can just plot the data points here, penetration of the network, the attacks are happening every day, whether you believe it or not. However we try to protect, it's just impossible for us to really protect it, right? But we can protect our critical systems, including the backup system, right? And the plan for fast recoveries. And that's the key thing that we will talk about today. And when it comes to recovering, and in fact, running the system itself, there are best practices. We call them as a well-architected framework, best practices. We are not going to talk about, all these 5 pillars, but the important pillar is security. And one of the interesting thing that's happening, and it's not new, is a zero trust implementation, right? There are clear specifications that are being rolled out by the federal authorities, so to speak. You have a centralized template, if you will, to implement a better security system, right? After all the attacks that we have seen on the news, right? SolarWinds attack, and then Microsoft Exchange attack, and so on. So zero trust is such a critical thing for us to implement, right? Being a vendor of backup and recovery and application resilience, we have that implementation ourselves internally for every one of our end user devices as well. Second thing is the reliability of the system really depends on the ability to recover your applications really, really fast. And if you don't have it, as I mentioned before, there's no point in even protecting those systems, right? Doesn't make any sense. So the reliability directly talks about the ability for you to recover your systems. And that's where well-architected frameworks really help you understand what are those best practices. And I'm not going to go into the details of this because the idea of this webinar is purely to talk about and also perhaps understand where the industry is with respect to helping you recover those systems really, really quick, particularly cloud application systems. And we have done many webinars with respect to well-architected framework. So please, if you have time, you could go and check out our YouTube channel. We have a number of webinars we have done over a period of 2 to 3 years now, right? But on the other hand, as more and more workloads migrate over to the cloud and also getting created as cloud native applications on the cloud, the cloud providers share the responsibility, and their responsibility boundaries are actually changing as well, right? And I can see, 5 years ago, there wasn't a dynamic DNS attack scenario, and the denial of service attack scenarios are now being kind of to an extent provided by AWS and other platform providers. So they have a level of protection against DDoS. Right. Similarly, other services are being created as the demand increases for them to share the responsibility. So the responsibility of the cloud ranges from obviously installing the data center, making sure the data centers are properly protected against multiple attacks, as well as other natural disasters and so on. On the other hand, the application level responsibility is also increasing, right? So it's a shared responsibility. These dynamics really work as long as you understand all the pieces that are in the mix. So it is important to really pay attention towards what is your responsibility, what is their responsibility, and not having that assumption that the cloud provider is responsible for your data and cloud provider is responsible for recovery of the data and cloud provider is somehow responsible for the retention of the data over a period of time at multiple recovery points. Unfortunately, that is your responsibility in terms of protecting your applications and the data corresponding to your applications, which means that you own the responsibility to recover your data and your systems, right? And I think this is very, very clear in terms of what's going on. Now the critical component comes into play as these applications, cloud applications, change over a period of time and they get complicated day in, day out to a point where these kind of applications are becoming normal. If you look at an application, this is one of those applications that we protect today, a financial services industry's critical enterprise data management system. And that has all kinds of moving parts, very dynamic, very distributed, very, very distributed to be exact. And it uses all kinds of services provided by AWS, including obviously the compute and the network and so on, and also the PaaS services, right? And the connectivity between them and the associated data, dynamic data associated with them. And within that environment, when you think about a system, I'm talking about a system like this, an application system. I'm not talking about a single tier, 2-tier, 3-tier, even 4-tier, 5-tier application. It's a very dynamic, distributed application. What that really means is that these applications push the boundaries day in, day out, because developers are writing new services. They are deploying the infrastructure along with the services. In fact, services themselves nowadays create the infrastructure necessary, right? So the infrastructure as code really enables the creation and management of the services along with the infrastructure. So now, if you think about it, how do you really recover these systems from ransomware? Right? If people consider the recovery of those older systems where a bunch of virtual machines are involved and maybe some databases and few file systems, or all the moving parts that are critical for your application to be back online, meaning that your business is back online. Now, if you complicated the applications while running on the cloud, now you have to really think about how you can really recover those systems really, really fast, meaning not 1 year and not spending millions of dollars, depending on how critical that application is, how rich you are, meaning your organization is, right? So that is where some of the best practices come in. It is not a one-time thing. It is a continuous process. In that, you should be able to not only protect your critical systems, meaning virtual machine security, groups and network identity, infrastructure, and so on, while that system is auto-scaling maybe, right, with a load balancer in the backend. Second and most important thing is that, in fact, this is the first one. I should have put this one as the first one, a gold image as a reference point, right? And that should be immutable. It's not like the old backup systems where, you capture your production file system, right? In an operating system, you go to NTFS or another mechanism, you protect that, and inadvertently, that also allows you to read and write back into it. That's why the backup systems should have the capability to take the data and make it immutable. You just should not allow that mutability of the data. And what is the most efficient way to do that, right? So you should not allow writing back into the system. Otherwise, the ransomware might get in, write their own signatures into your blocks of data, and then encryption happens. The stages, you can remember, right? The stages of attack, and then by the time you know it, you are in a ransomware demand situation, and you have to really figure out what that is. Third, the copies that you make, that's totally fine. Anyone can make, any backup system can make a golden copy, the first copy that you make, and after that can make an incremental copy so that you don't spend your network bandwidth and start collecting your systems. While start collecting the data from the systems, you might slow down, because if you're collecting the data, completely instead of incrementally. So all of that is taken for granted. The incremental data collection happens from your production system for backup purposes, right? But another important part is that, are you backing up those configurations of your systems incrementally as well? And once you have all these mechanisms to collect and move the data to appropriate places Now you have to really think about how can you prevent these attackers from getting to that backup system, backup location, right? So air gap is one of the mechanisms, but people are going beyond the air gap because there's very difficult. There is an instance where even if you try to prevent the networks, meaning with air gap mechanisms, it's just impossible for you to understand all the network flows. And even if you analyze all the network logs, the flow logs, in fact, it's very difficult to understand if there is real air gap because you're allowing the data copy from one of your data center to another data center, one of the regions from on the AWS itself from one region to another region. So air gapping is such an important thing if you can do it. Otherwise, completely isolate the data copies in another account, maybe in another region, right? So another region, another account is the best approach, given the RPO requirement, the copy, the ability to copy fast enough for you, right? So that you don't have too much data loss. And now you have to really think about recovering all your configurations. So if ransomware started getting into your system over months and weeks and months and maybe a year, right? Now you don't know when they really got in. And assuming that you have all the backups, immutable copies. So this is all assumptions, right? Like you have proper backups and proper immutability for those backups, and which means that re-architecting your backup solution now, re-architecting your recovery solutions now, right? So I'm assuming even that is not possible, you can do it. Now what happens is that how do you know what kind of configurations you had before the attack really happened? All your compute sizes, network configurations, the load balances, even the type of virtual machine that you used to use in your production region of AWS or Azure or GCP. And what was the state of that? What was like the security group configuration associated with the load balancer, configured auto-scaled virtual machines that are running your critical systems? That's what I'm talking about. And that's when it really occurs that recovery is very, very hard, right? So I hope that is like in one time. Unfortunately, it is not. It is a continuous operation. This is where the centralized SREs and operations teams really struggle. Yes, the business heads really understand that, oh, you protect against ransomware. That's an easier statement. But at the end of the day, if you try to really protect it, right, and assuming that you have somehow obtained some kind of a protection, it doesn't stop because environment is continuously changing. Newer services are being deployed. This so-called DevOps culture is changing. It's actually putting more pressure on the ops teams. Now they are becoming SRE teams, site reliability engineering teams, specific to applications themselves in terms of operations. And they hold the responsibility to recover all the services, maybe the entire system, which means that they need to continuously protect. They need to understand what's going on in their system so that they can actually go and check out if their systems are actually being protected or not. And then only you are in a position to go and recover those cloud resources in the event of a failure or completely isolate. So Gartner has this isolated recovery environments, right? Because you cannot assume that even if you are able to bring back your systems back in the same production region, that those region enabled services and recovered systems will not be attacked by the ransomware that is already in place in your production region, production environment. So it's very important to isolate, in fact, completely network-wise isolate the systems in a different region, completely in a location where, far away from, the production region, right? And if you have the ability, then you have a level of protection. Now you have to start thinking about, can I really do this with an existing backup and recovery that are slow to copy? So the RPO requirements are decreasing day by day. I need to be able to copy the data really fast enough so that I don't lose the data when the ransomware attack happens. So ability to copy the data fast is important. Second, you cannot copy enough using the regular backup system, so you end up doing some kind of a replication system. So now you have two systems to worry about, two systems to protect. Maybe depending on the applications, you might have different backup systems, different replication systems, and so on. So a lot of people kind of by default go into some kind of a manually controlled snapshots using cloud provider-based snapshot mechanism. That's great. It's just that you have to be careful, even if you're trying to protect 100 virtual machine instances with 2 data disks. And if you're just protecting every hour, I'm not talking about 15 minutes protection, every hour. What happens is that by the end of the day, if you retain for 24 hours, you will end up having 12,500 snapshots. So how would you really recover your system among those 100 instances? I'm not even talking about serverless systems, PaaS systems, containers, and so on. Very simple systems running on the virtual machines. How do you really do that if you don't have continuous analysis and discovery of your systems and understand the resiliency issues? Right? Now, if you have a proprietary backup management system running on that, then you have the responsibility to really protect it and not going back and forth with the translation between your production environment data format versus the backup format. Right? With all of that, if you have to continuously do that, then you have to really think about the muscle in order to obtain that muscle memory of the ability to recover your system really quickly, which means that you will have to have some mechanism to reduce the cost of those recoveries as well, right? And there is not another or not a best way, even from a well-architected framework perspective, the ability to recover your system means that the ability to use cloud-native capabilities, including cloud-native infrastructure as code capabilities, right? And that's where Appranix really helps. The way we do it is very simple. In fact, it is night and day. Don't have to worry about all those complexities. In fact, we listed 15 of them, and it could be more. And in Appranix, it's much simpler. In fact, it is just, log in and recover. In fact, if you think about all of those complexities in terms of really protecting your environment, and also think and plan for those recoveries, it becomes really, really difficult. That's why we enable. So if you are able to really do a quick POC, or even protect my systems over a coffee break in under 15 minutes, assuming that you are able to drink your coffee within 15 minutes, that's really, really fast. I go for extra hot, skim milk type of thing. I really take time to drink coffee, but that is not even the case. You can actually do it within 15 minutes. The entire protection and the recovery, do a test to understand what is possible now on the cloud platforms, because the traditional mechanisms really not helping anymore. And there are too many parts, too many moving parts, dynamically moving parts, continuously changing. That's why we are being loved in the environment, right? In the industry, we are, I cannot put all of these on the social media all the time, but the word is spreading, right? We are educating more. Our brand awareness is growing day by day, and we are trying to educate. There is a better way to do the protection of your systems on the cloud while the cloud is churning out your instances. Your performance needs to be improved, so you need to protect. The other key thing is that with this great resignation period after post-pandemic, I'm just assuming that it's post-pandemic already, people are moving out of the organization really, really fast. Yesterday, I was dialing into a call with one of our potential customers. He said, I have application resilience in my radar, but the issue is that 50% of staff either have resigned or on vacation. Now he's 50% less capacity. He cannot even think of implementing these systems, which is more critical if you think about it, because now you are understaffed. What happens when the ransomware attack really happens? You may not be in a business, so that's the worst case scenario. But this is where a system that is simple, system that doesn't suck all your energy to be able to put a backup system, put the agents across the board. All your systems need to be properly protected, not only the VMs, but also configuration, the state, the dependencies, and so on, but not only in your current production region, but across another region. Appranix makes it dead simple. We discover your environment. We continue to discover your environment. We understand your dependencies. And we do that with no agents. We simply create a cloud time machine by simply collecting the metadata of your configurations. We do not take your data. We orchestrate your data to different places across the cloud data network. Believe it or not, cloud providers have enough capability. They continue to improve their capabilities. If you listen to Satya Nadella, latest discussions on the net after the exchange and SolarWinds situation happened, Microsoft is pouring so much into cybersecurity. So they are going to add more and more and more capabilities into their cloud platform. You should be able to take advantage of that. The data, business critical data, is such an important asset. Cloud providers have enough capability to really move the data to the places where you want them to move, from one region to another region, from all your zones to another set of zones in completely different region, in fact, geographically different region as well. And also you can isolate them in a different subscription, different account, cloud account, different project, and have the ability to make all this data immutable. The question is, can existing backup and DR systems do it? Appranix enables that to happen seamlessly, forever incremental, completely immutable, snapshot-oriented copies. Unless you activate them, you cannot write into them. They are completely immutable by using cloud-native capabilities. That's the best of both worlds. Now, when it comes down to recoveries, Appranix understands them really well. But here is the best part. Why are we so different from others? Just think about the scenario. It's a decentralized ransomware recovery scenarios, right? A solution that really helps to go against the way ransomware attacks really happen. We assume that ransomware attacks really happen all the time. Or ransomware are already there, right? The production region, just imagine that you are running in one of the regions of AWS. You're distributed, dynamically changing, ever increasing, ever complicated application, business critical application. If it goes down, your business goes down as well, is running in one of the regions. Now you employ a Appranix service. It creates an immutable cloud time machine, but it captures all the metadata only. We don't take your data. Taking your data to another cloud is like waste of time. Your RPO sucks. RTO is really bad, which means that your recoveries is bad, all of that. So we recognize that, and that is not our architecture. Your data stays wherever it is, but it's moved within the AWS account. So within your account, across another region, all of the replication, all of the retention policies, all of that are completely isolated and moved to different locations based on your policies. And those policies are completely automated, right? Which means that just assume that even if you want to make copies of your entire application environment every 15 minutes between Virginia to Ohio, we can do it. This environment is actually being done. Not only that, you can have every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour, every day, every week, and you can stack them together so that you have multiple points in time, multiple reference points. That's all fantastic. But when it comes down to recoveries, how do you really touch that button and recover? And that's what Appranix does. Uses your immutable data copies that are forever incremental to give you the full application copy from those immutable copies in a different region, completely isolated recovery environment that is so different from your production VPC. Now you can run your application, borrow time, negotiate with your attacker, right? And make sure that your application runs. And if everything runs okay, then you continue to run, while Appranix is actually protecting more and more. Your policies do not change. Appranix will continue to protect even when you recover your environment in another region, another VPC. So you can spin up another set of instances. And that's where it helps to give you so many different use cases, because you're not going to buy another ransomware recovery system because of ransomware attacks are increasing day by day, right? You're not going to change your backup systems that easily. You're going to go through maybe one more re-architecture based on your cloud architecture. And once you put in, that system should be able to evolve over a period of time. So instead of having a backup system installed right in the same region, even if you enabled multi-factor authentication into the same region, if the region gets attacked, you cannot even get into your own account. So how good is your backup system for the ransomware recoveries? Right? And that's why a decentralized way, where the data, real data, moves between two different regions across within your own accounts. And they can be encrypted with two different keys, production keys as well as recovery keys. Those are all available by default in your AWS platform itself. Now you take the metadata configuration, how to recover these environments to a different environment. Appranix does that. So you have split responsibility. Now, even if the ransomware gets in there, there is no way for them to identify how to delete the second region unless somebody else brings up that environment. So split approach automatically provides a level of resiliency that wasn't there before. Right? Now you can use it for multiple other purposes. Let's actually take a look at how we can actually do it. So for that, I have actually prepared a nice environment. Yeah, it's a production environment, so you can good that Chrome allows tab groups nowadays. So production runs on a bunch of instances. The application is actually a critical application called Open EMR, Open Emergency Medical Records application, where you can have patients and procedures and administration. All of that is critical for a set of hospitals nowadays being used. This system is being used across many different hospitals. So I take that during the pandemic time to show how critical applications are, and this spread out. It's not only instances, even if they are running, we are protecting those. And the VPC configuration, you can see, has multiple subnets, multiple VPCs, but we are protecting that one particular VPC, and network coupled route tables, internet gateways, and all of that complex configurations. And if you go into the security groups, you can see the configuration of the security groups are like, we can see all of that complex ones, including the tags and things like that. All of that configuration is important, but it's also important that you understand your VPC, which is one of the ones that where you install once and then you forget it, right? You don't really touch it, but that's the critical piece. Now you put load balancers. There are so many load balancers, categories of load balancers, the types of load balancers, application load balancer, network load balancers, and the classic load balancer. And 5 years down the line, who knows how many load balancers are there, and how many changes that occur within individual services, right? AWS in the last 2 years alone has released 200 different machine types. It's crazy enough to even think of and documenting and really understand what your application developers are using, what your systems are really going through in terms of even the sizes of and types of those instances. So we assume that everything is changing all the time, every minute, every millisecond rather, right? So that is an environment that is running. And we have the recovery environment completely isolated in a different region, California region. As you can see, there are no instances here, right? And you can see no load balancers. And the VPC has one default one because you can have a VPC already set up. but this is a demo environment, so we have some running. So you can see, subnet is like couple. You can see what those subnets are. It's simple default ones that we have, and you can see all of that. But the key thing is that now I have to bring back my application, our set of applications. People actually create multiple systems. We call it cloud assemblies. An assembly of resources really make up your application system, rather. And people have like 25 different assemblies. Another one has 13 different assemblies and one account, right? And then people have multiple accounts. One of the customers has 400 different AWS accounts. So it's crazy enough to really understand the complexity within one system. But people have complicated depending on how the systems run for a good reason, right? And depending on how their businesses really demanded them to run their applications, and somehow they made it run. Now, how do you really protect this? We made it simple, as I mentioned. You simply go in, get an account. You can go from your AWS marketplace or other cloud marketplaces. We support all three clouds. And you go get in there. So first of all, we need to protect this environment itself. So we enable automatically a multi-factor authentication, right? So you cannot get in unless you have your mobile and potentially you have your authenticator running. Without that, you cannot get in. So I have my authenticator running now. So I should be able to get the keys, appropriate keys. So this is a level of protection that is not allowed into your backup environment itself. By the way, we are not even protecting your data. We are moving the data. We are protecting all your environment metadata. So even with that, you have to go through an MFA. So you get in, and log in, and you can connect to your SSO as well. So once you get in, you will be landing a place called Cloud Connection. Establish a cloud connection into your account. You simply click, select the primary region, select the recovery region, put a name. We automatically create necessary permission-based service accounts for you to run. Click a button. The permissions are approved. You can review those permissions. Even if something happens to Appranix, you can get rid of those permissions with a simple query and delete, right? That's simple. So we made it simpler even for that one. So once you get in, you get a bunch of cloud connections or one cloud connection with multiple services running there, assuming that you have one of those cloud connections where you can see all these application load balances, classic load balances, elastic file systems, RDS. Under RDS, you have all the 4 RDSs covered. Under compute, obviously, all the types, including the 200 different types launched in the last 2 years, are covered as well. So if you think about it, a system like this has about 146 load balances, believe it or not. 146 application load balances, not just load balances. The network load balances are separate, right? So as you can see, this application environment runs across 3 different zones in a particular region with all the connectivities, right? So once you have, we discover all of that. We discover all the dependencies. And you simply represent your application system as an assembly. An assembly is nothing but a set of resources. You don't have to struggle to even represent your assembly. You simply send your tags, right? So if you think about creating that assembly, basically just select the top level resources or tell us your tags. And as you auto scale, we go by the tags. We automatically know that AWS under the load balancer has spun up 15 more instances, and they need to be protected as well, because if that happens 15 minutes ago, you want to get your performance of your application back to what it was. So what that means is that you not only understand all these dynamic environments, right, and then get back. So I am hopefully selecting the right resources here. So all of the compute, and then you put the policies, hourly policy, daily policy, weekly policy, and so on, right? If you look at some of the other complex assemblies here, you can stack them up with hourly, daily, 30 minutes, weekly, monthly, yearly, all the global copies across the board, right? Retentions of all those copies, which means there's so many points to go back and recover. You can go back hourly, 48 hours. You can go back to weekly, 4 weeks ago, monthly, 12 months ago, and so on. 12 months ago, actually, we created the policies, which means that we should be able to go back, at least with 12 retentions, right? So you can go back and then look at the timelines for those. This is all, right? Obviously, not 7 days. I can go back to last October. Think about that. My system used to run last October properly, and I took my Christmas days off and then came back, and now we started running. Nobody knows whether the attack really happened at the time. The ransomware guys, attackers are super smart nowadays. They are patient as well. So how do I really recover? And that's when you go back and look at the time machine. So here, go back, let's say, for demo purposes, I'm just going back an hour ago, right? I can obviously go back, depending on the policy types, I can go back to weekly and then put it in September 11th is another one. And if you go back in time, so we deleted basically a life cycle is running because it's my credit card, right? So go back to September 11th. Jesus, that was unfortunately the wrong timing, right? September 11th. Anyway, so attack happened, and I want to just go back at the time, right? Trust me, I didn't really choose that. It just happened that September 11th occurred, and it occurred to me, gosh, it's September 11th. So hope none of that really happens again, right? So if it happens, I want to recover my systems to West Coast from East Coast. And I simply click that button, touch the button if you have the iPad, and say ransomware, wrong name, but I'm going to use it, ransomware recovery, bad ransomware recovery, right? Other region, entire assembly, please recover in California, right? And I say enabled reset, if I'm doing a drill, right? It's very helpful. Turn it off after 1 hour. All the systems are going back again. Click the button. Here is that interesting point, isn't it? Right? It's like going back to the days where it took 100K for a small city, with just 50,000 people, and gosh, I wish these people really protected their systems with Appranix, and hopefully they ran on cloud. And most of them are still running on the data center, right? So can't blame them. It's Collierville, Tennessee, right? Entire year to recover, right? And they have no idea how the network was put together, let's say, right? The load balancer configurations, all of that wonderful things that all the developers used, all the system administrators used to make sure the production ran. That's a critical thing, right? You have to first of all run the production so that you can protect it. So they made sure the production ran, but they had to really configure that thing properly. Now, when you recover, you need to know what really happened on September 11th, right? Because now you're recovering September 16th. So if you go back and see what's really happening, look at that cloud formation. So cloud formation stack here, stacks in Virginia. So I need to go to the California region. If you go to the California region, the stack is coming up, bad ransomware recovery, entire thing is getting created. All the resources are coming up. The template, if you look at it, this is interesting that somebody had to really automatically write all of that wonderful infrastructure as code, right? It's great to talk about, but when it comes down to the, putting your fingers on the keyboard to write these things, it's like, what am I supposed to do with all of these dependencies? If I mistyped because obviously I'm drinking coffee or something like that, that's bad because your application is not going to come up, right? Look at the dependencies. Instead of IPv4, if I type in IPv6, can you imagine that wonderful thing that happens to my system? It's critical that we understand all these configurations. Infrastructure as code is great, but it's a double-edged sword. You have to be really careful. And now, if you have all of that, every one of these dots are really configurations. How do I know what really happened on the September 11th, right? It's like unbelievable, right? It's and IP addresses. Oh, by the way, I need to retain my IP addresses. Gosh, how do I know which IP address was used in what system and when, and how that configuration was put together along with the security groups? I go nuts, and that's why it takes a year. Even if it took a year, what's the guarantee that you can bring back that environment to the original glory, right? And this is where businesses go out of business, right? And gosh, would it be nice if someone really brought that system back again with all those configurations and all those load balances, right? All those wonderful load balances that never existed in the California region. You can see the external load balances coming up. All the listeners are configured appropriately, and integrated services, they are all coming up, by the way. They will be added more and more, including the tags, assembly tags, the description of those, internal load balancer, configurations of those, subnet groups. Within the subnet groups, you have so many other configurations. Who is going to really worry about those configurations, right? Multi-AZ subnet groups. Trust me, I don't really understand all of this, right? As a guy who is supposed to take care of the people to run the company, I don't understand this multi-AZ subnet thing. But as a founder and CEO of the company, I was able to click that single button, right? And let's see, I have the VPC subnet, route table, internet gateway. Let's refresh the entire thing, right? Let's see what has really been created in California. You can see 5 route tables. There was 1 subnet. Now I have 6 subnets. All of that are coming up here, right? And then a bunch of security groups are coming up. DHCP option sets. Gosh, I know a little bit about DHCP, but options is because you can now throw in the options because it's a public cloud. If it were your own data center, probably you would just be worried about just the DHCP. Options need to be provided in a public shared infrastructure so you can customize. And that's why these option sets are there. And then the instances are supposed to be running right after the creation, all of that. Network occurs. If you don't give access permissions, obviously your applications will not come back. So that's what it is. It's so ability to recover your systems really fast. Hopefully it is under 5 minutes. And prove that you actually recovered those. This is where the access logs are important, right? And then if you can create those PDF report, this is, by the way, a latest feature that our guys demonstrated. This is one of those things with the SaaS systems. You refresh, you get the new functionality. This is, as of today, we released a new functionality so that you have proof that you recovered, your wonderful recovery report. All of these services have been recreated as if nothing happened as of September 11th in about 4 minutes and 31 seconds. Isn't it cool? Let me stop my bragging rights here. Anyway, I will. I think we have only 5 minutes. I think I went too far in terms of explaining all of that nicely, hopefully nicely. So if you have time, please raise your questions. We have one of our members as well. I'm not sure Philip is monitoring all of that. But if you have questions, please, you can type it in the chat area. I will try to respond as quickly as possible. All right. Maybe I gave too much info, right? Maybe you're shy not to add those questions in a public area, but I'm not. It's not visible to everyone. And if you were attacked, or if you're not attacked, knock on wood, hopefully you're not. And please be careful. Please protect your systems, whether you use Appranix or not. But at least hopefully you get an idea. It is opened up some ideas in terms of really thinking through what you could be doing, what you could do better for your organization, right? To protect it, to secure your network, so to understand even after attacks, how you could potentially recover those systems. So with that, let me close. Thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Hope it was worthwhile. And what we will do is that we will. Oh, there is a question. How to identify when, how attack happened in the cloud will you get an alert? So the attack identification, right? There are so many security systems that will give you that level of information, right? And the security systems are increasing in terms of capability, sophistication-wise, right? And this is not one time; it's very dynamic. And there are like at some point in time, 2 years ago, there were like 600 security companies, startups, and more security companies are getting started, right? So you have a ton of those capabilities available. And we could be doing more. It's not that we are done with it. We'll have some anomaly detection mechanisms as well in the future, right? So we would understand the blocks that are being encrypted. So we'll have more capabilities. But for now, there'll be data that will be taken. But again, I mean, the continuous data will be flowing. I mean, the question here is one of the gentlemen is asking now, because there will be a continuous data flow between production and DR. Yes, there will be flow, there will be attacks, and there will be ransomware. We cannot clean all of those ransomware, right? But that is not the issue. The issue is that the ability to go back to a point in time where the attacks really happened. So let's say that your attack really happened. You got an alert saying that somebody attacked your system, network, and now you try to log in. You're not able to log into your own AWS network. Even if you log into your own network, you're not able to log into your application. That's kind of one of the attack scenarios. Obviously, the data was copied between your production environment and recovery environment. And Appranix, hopefully, is monitoring your environment and making sure that the production is happening every day and every week and so on. Now you have the choice, right? The ability to have the choice. That relief that you can actually potentially recover that. You log into Appranix, you go back in time, right? And recover those systems. Even with different encryptions, you can recover those systems. Completely isolated network, completely isolated VPC. Just imagine that power. Now, if you're able to recover those isolated application environment, you may have to connect all other services and so on, but at least your critical system will be back up and running, right? There is no limit. So the next question is there a limit to how far back you can go? There is no limit. It depends on how much you want to spend with AWS. So we will, we'll take all kinds of policies, right? You can go back in policies. So as an example, if you go back to one of the policies that we have, policy is that yearly policy, right? Like I said, yearly policy 12 months ago. So if I go into this particular policy, hopefully I have, let me just go back and see all, not 7 days, right? A year ago, I can go back. So we put in the policy 1 year ago. Can say I can go back to October 2020, right? And if you have that policy running for 5 years, I have a 5-year retention policy. I can go back 5 years ago. There's no limit. You can go and create a policy saying that yearly policy, and I can put in 100 years, right? Google Cloud hopefully is there for 100 years, but the good thing is that they are responsible for recovering those 100 years old data. They cannot say no because we made the copy. This is the best part about the cloud providers because they are responsible. It's almost like a government, right? They provide the retention capability. Make use of that instead of putting another backup system, and you are responsible for making sure that you are protecting that data for 100 years, right? So hopefully that gives that data. How are you capturing the existing IP and assign the same IP? Absolutely. We capture the existing IP, we capture the CIDR, we capture the subnet, we capture the VPC configurations. So you don't have to even worry about creating that IP address. So if you go into your cloud network, so if it is IP address here, we are able to bring back that IP address to a point where, the IP address here, let's search if we can, the IP address, right? So you are able to bring back even the cider blocks and everything, right? We do all that magic of capturing all of that, making sure that everything comes. That's our magic sauce, right? So we take care of that. Private IP addresses are retained within the cider block, right? So your connectivity is retained. All right. Any other questions? Great questions, by the way. All right. So we'll have the recorded information. We typically put that on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and refer, can pass it on to other people. And if you are in need of some kind of a recovery system from ransomware or otherwise, where to contact. Please go to our website, click book a demo type. We can customize a demo for you. We can talk in depth in terms of what your application type is, where you're running, whether it is on AWS or Azure. We can do exactly the same thing across GCP, Azure, as well as AWS. So with that, thank you for joining, and have a great day.